They're beyond help. Whoa, relax, Jumpy.
Dude, it's kind of crazy how I knew exactly where this was going the second I saw her. So guys, Arcane Season 2 has finally come to an end. Now, have I mentally recovered? No. Have I locked myself in my room analyzing every single scene in this season frame by frame to find deeper meanings and clues? Absolutely. Because Jinx being dead? Psh. Yeah, alright. But it is kind of crazy how on top of a lot of emotional distress, Arcane Season 2 gave us so much content. Like there were genuinely so many things going on this season that in retrospect, it kind of felt like it was too much at times. You know, almost like this last season felt a little bit rushed and Arcane should have got 3 seasons instead of 2. But hey, that's just my opinion, like who am I? But between emo Vi, little kids blowing themselves up, and scenes that, you know, I don't even think I could show this on YouTube. One thing that I never expected to be the standout highlight of this season for me and so many other fans of the series was an episode revolving around a relationship between Ekko and Powder, because this was perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And when I say perfect, it's really not even an exaggeration. A couple days ago, I put up a poll asking everybody what was their favorite episode from season 2. And this episode won by a landslide. And there's multiple reasons why people love this episode and this dynamic so much, but I just think it's so funny that in a world where we thought Kate Vi was as good as it was gonna get, Timebomb comes in at the last minute and completely steals the show. So much to the point where fans are online right now fiending for the possibility to see these two back on screen together, no matter which timeline it takes place in. And look, don't get me wrong, I ain't much of a shipper, but this has had my full attention for the past week. This is peak cinema and I have become obsessed with this. So today we're going to take a look at the cursed romance of Ekko and Jinx, why it's such a tragic yet beautiful story, and most importantly, cover all the really cool Easter eggs we've gotten after season 2's release and why it's very likely that we'll see these two together on screen again. Now, something that's so interesting about Arcane's writing is that the writers imply more to the viewer than they actually show. And if you don't pay close attention, you will miss a lot of important things. And this is no different with Ekko and Jinx's relationship, because while it's never explicitly shown in the show, it is implied throughout the series that Ekko and Jinx were close as kids. Now, you wouldn't really be wrong for missing this detail because if I'm being honest, they don't really have any scenes together as kids in Act 1. The closest scenes we even have is one where Powder refers to Ekko when getting questioned by Vander.
Where did you even get this tip?
We just heard it at Benzo's shop.
From?
Little man.
And a scene where Ekko is talking to Vi and Powder's just sticking her head by the door. But if we use a little context clues, it's very obvious that Ekko and Powder had to have been close. For one, they both looked up to Vi and hung around Vi. And from what we see in the alternate universe, as well as a conversation that Ekko had with Clagger as kids, we know that Ekko was cool with Milo and Clagger. So it just wouldn't really make sense that Ekko would be cool with all the Powder siblings, but not Powder. But even if you look past that, in episode 7 with Ekko's fight with Jinx, we see that during the fight, we keep getting flashbacks to a young Powder and a young Ekko. And while in the current day they're fighting to the death, we see that in the flashback that they're simulating a game that they used to play as kids. One where Powder shoots paintballs at Ekko and Ekko tries to dodge them. And this is kind of a sidebar because this isn't actually in the main show, but in the music video for the opening song Enemy, we actually get multiple scenes of Ekko and Powder interacting as kids. And there's multiple different details in this music video that allude to the idea that Ekko might have been the only friend that Powder had that didn't traumatize her into turning into Jinx. The music video is centered around Powder as she slowly goes from being that happy innocent kid to the psychotic Jinx that we see in season 1. We start off with happy scenes of Powder and Vi being sisters, only for later in the music video for their relationship to become more and more rocky. Now there's one scene in this music video that I think really highlighted how close Ekko and Powder had to have been. And it's a scene where Ekko, Powder, Milo, and Clagger, as well as Imagine Dragons for some reason, they're sitting around watching Vi train. We then see Powder, who we know from the main series always wanted to be useful and always wanted to be like Vi. We see her training trying to emulate Vi. But as Powder is training, we see that the only person that is watching her is Ekko. Now there's two ways you could look at this scene, one of them being that nobody actually cared to watch Powder train except for Ekko, which Honestly, it's kinda sad. But then there's the other way, the way I interpreted this scene. And that's that Ekko was the only other person that Powder felt comfortable training in front of. Because it makes sense why she wouldn't want to train in front of Milo and Clagger, because every time we see them in the main series, they're either calling her useless or blaming her for something. And it makes sense that she wouldn't want to train in front of Vi, because Powder always wanted to impress Vi, she always wanted to prove that she was useful. So her training in secret so that she could pop out one day and impress Vi by surprising her makes complete sense. But when it comes to Ekko, we've never actually seen a bad interaction between him and Powder. In fact, even throughout the course of the music video, even though Powder is slowly drifting more and more into becoming like Jinx, every time Ekko appears, he's always right by her side, with them being the best of friends. And look, while this is just a music video, I do think it's intentional because it does support all the ideas that we see later on in the show. So we know that Ekko and Jinx were close, maybe not romantic, but at the very least, they were friends. And we also know that after the death of Milo and Clagger, as well as Vi getting arrested, Ekko and Jinx took two completely different paths in life. Jinx, after accidentally killing Milo and Clagger, as well as not only believing that Vi was dead, but believing that before she died, she completely abandoned her, it drove her to complete insanity, becoming a broken, traumatized version of herself. And this was something that Silco was able to prey on. Now, a lot of people argue whether Silco loved Jinx as a daughter, and I don't really know why this is still an argument. I think it's very clear that he did in his own messed up way. But I think what a lot of people should be acknowledging is that no matter how much Silco loved Jinx as a daughter, he enabled the worst parts of her. Her insecurities, her trauma, her fear. He pushed her to make that who she is, rather than something she should actually heal from. And we would see throughout the course of 7 years, Jinx would work with Silco terrorizing Zaun, helping him smuggle Shimmer into Piltover to start Silco's second rebellion. Whereas Ekko, on the other hand, would actually start a rebellion against his drug smuggling in his home. He would find and build the tree safe haven for the people that needed to find a new life in Zaun or that were addicted to Shimmer. And he would form the Firelights, a rebel group to combat Silco's criminal activities and eliminate Shimmer out of Zaun. Now, once again, this isn't something that is shown in the show, but it is implied that at some point in time when Ekko formed the Firelights, he did look for Powder to try to save her, which is why Jinx calls Ekko the boy savior when they're on the bridge.
Oh, look who it is, the boy savior.
But in an interview with the producers of Arcane, it was actually explained that there was supposed to be a scene at the beginning of episode 7 that showed this interaction.
There was another scene in episode 7.
Yeah.
That unfortunately,
Or fortunately.
yeah, who knows, didn't make it because the episode was just too long. But it was a flashback to the time when, I guess shortly after, episode 3, when Ekko, you would kind of see, how Ekko would kind of start building this community, and he would actually try to find Powder, and save her, and just something very dramatic happened between them. It definitely, for me, cemented a lot of their relationship, and I don't know, hopefully we can still explore it at some point in the future, because it was just it's really cool.
And it's so interesting that this interaction was cut from season 1, because I think it makes Ekko and Jinx's fight on the bridge so much more impactful. Because without the context, you might think that Jinx is just mocking Ekko by calling him the boy savior. But I think it goes even further than that. Part of the reason why Jinx even became Jinx is because she lost everything. Her sister, her brothers, and her adopted father figure. Then she gets taken in by Silco and works as a thug for him. So imagine from her perspective that her life's been completely turned upside down, losing everyone. And then she hears about Ekko and what he's been doing, growing this community, growing the Firelights, and saving people, giving them new lives. And I'm sure there's a part of her that resented Ekko, saying that if Ekko could save all these people, why couldn't he save her? Why couldn't he save Vi or Milo or Clagger or Vander? I think that's why she was so frustrated when she delivered that one line, because she partially blames Ekko for that, but also the fact that Ekko was the only reason that they knew where Vander was. He was part of the reason why all of her family members went out that day. And while none of this is actually any of Ekko's fault, I think Jinx just used Ekko as an outlet to throw her anger onto. And from Ekko's perspective, seeing everything that happened from the time of Vander's death up until this moment on the bridge had to be devastating. Because just like Jinx losing all these people broke her, Ekko was equally as close to all of them too. He had to deal with not only losing Vander, but also losing Benzo, as well as Milo and Clagger. And for 7 years, he also thought that Vi was dead. So imagine that he goes after the one person from his old life that he finds out is still alive, and he thinks that they're being held captive by Silco, only to find out that she's not working for Silco because she has to, she's doing it because she wants to. And just like there was a part of Jinx that blamed Ekko for not being able to save them, there was also a part of Ekko that blamed himself.
I should have been there. For you. For everyone.
That's a good way to drive yourself crazy. If I just went with you that day, maybe none of this would have happened.
Ekko was able to save all these people, build this community, become this symbol-like figure, but he couldn't save someone who was one of the closest people to him as a kid. And what's worse, he had to watch her slowly turn into a completely different person, one that he couldn't even recognize. He's seen Jinx up close kill his friends, terrorize the lanes, and run with a gang leader that is ruining the lives of everyone, turning their home into a place that they can't even recognize, which ultimately leads to Ekko giving up on her. He puts the image of Kid Powder on the mural wall to symbolize that the friend that he once knew is dead, and now there's only Jinx, which is why he's so adamant to Vi, saying that her sister is gone and there's nothing that she can do to change that.
Your sister works for him not because she has to, but because she wants to. I'm sorry, but that's who she is now.
But when the time finally comes and Ekko has the chance to put Jinx down for good, he can't do it because all he sees when he looks at her is that girl that he grew up with. And this is a little detail that I haven't seen too many people mention now that season 2 is over, but originally in season 1 when Ekko couldn't finish off Jinx, she pulled out a grenade and tried to blow the two of them up. Now from the looks of it, the next time we see Ekko, it looks like he was able to outrun the grenade, only damaging his leg. And while that's still probably true, in season 2 we get a flashback of Ekko when he's on the bridge, and he's staring there at a Jinx who's lying there on the ground with explosion smud all over her face. But in season 1, when we see Silco pick up Jinx off the bridge, she has the smudge smeared on her face, as if someone had already touched her. So it's more than likely that even after everything that happened, everything that they went through, Ekko still went back to check to see if Jinx was still alive. Now look, a lot of things happen in Arcane season 2, many dictatorships, children blowing themselves up, and weird robot cults. But the most important thing that we need to know is that after the fight with Jinx on the bridge, Ekko ends up linking up with Heimerdinger, who then introduces Ekko to Jace. And you know, despite being 3 of the smartest people in all of Piltover, our boys end up getting sent out into different timelines. And while J-Man Jace was fighting for his life in the apocalypse, our boy Ekko got sent to a timeline that can only be described as heaven on earth for him. Because in this timeline, almost everything wrong with his timeline has been fixed. Instead of most of the people he grew up with dying, Vi was the only one that ended up dying. And as a result, Milo, Clagger, Benzo, and Vander were all still alive. I also found it hilarious that Vander and Silco ended up becoming friends again. Like, that was just so funny to me, because Ekko's reaction was my reaction.
Didn't you try to kill him?
Greatest thing we can do in life is find the power to forgive.
But another thing that made this alternate universe so interesting is that in this universe, Powder never turned into Jinx. Because Vi died when they were a kid and there was never that moment where Vi turned on Powder, Powder never broke mentally. And while it's clear in certain scenes that she isn't completely over the death of Vi, it's clear that she's in a completely different headspace than the Jinx in our universe. But when Ekko spawns into this alternate universe, taking over the consciousness of the Ekko from that universe, he's in complete shock to see not only a grown version of Powder, but one that is acting extra friendly with them.
Hey, Space Boy. I'm not talking to myself over here. What is up with you?
And it's just so crazy to imagine how Ekko must have felt in this moment, because mind you, not that long ago, he was literally standing over the Jinx from our timeline, preparing to end her. Yes, they were friends at one point in time, but this is the same girl throughout the course of 7 years that he has witnessed in his companions in front of him time after time again, as well as just completely turn into a monster that he couldn't even recognize. So to have this version of her where she's not only completely sane, but being very compassionate and very touchy towards him, no wonder bro had to go throw up real quick. And I think what's so funny about this dynamic at first is because from what we know and from Ekko's perspective, he seems justified for being mean to her in the way he's acting. But when you really think about it, he's really just being mean to her for absolutely no reason, because she hasn't done anything. This Powder from this universe is not the Jinx from the other universe. So when Ekko asked her if she's the reason why Vi's dead, did she do it? It's just so uncalled for, because it's like, this girl didn't do anything to you. Now, one thing that I I've consistently liked about Ekko's character is the fact that he is a good person. And even when he's thrown into situations where he objectively has the right to not be kind to someone, he still chooses to be. Now, there's nothing for sure that indicates that Ekko from the original timeline realized that the Ekko from this timeline was romantic with Powder, even though we do see at the very beginning of the episode that this world's Ekko did draw a little sketch of Powder with a heart next to it, but we can at least tell that Ekko realized that the Powder from this universe wasn't similar to his Jinx. So he apologizes to her by painting a mural of Vi at all the different ages that this Powder never got to see her sister grow up to become. And while this was a sweet moment between the two, I think this moment actually gave some insight into how Ekko felt about the Jinx from his universe.
You aren't the kind of person who helps other people with their projects. Your ideas change the world. I can't shake the feeling that that's who you're supposed to be.
But the thing is, Ekko doesn't really know this Powder. Everything he's saying to her is based off what he thinks he knows and how he feels about the Powder from his universe. So when he tells her, I had a dream that you were different and that your ideas changed the world, he's speaking about the Powder from his universe. Which is why Ekko seeing this alternate Powder must be a little bit heartbreaking for him. Because it's in this moment that we hear for the first time how he truly felt about Powder. This was a girl he grew up with, a person he was really close to. But because of so many different circumstances, that person that Ekko once knew changed so much to the point where he almost views them as dead, as if they're not even alive anymore. But now, after so many years of feeling this way, as well as the big conflict that they had on the bridge, he's now standing across from that same person that he once knew. And I don't think there's any scene that highlighted how tragic yet beautiful this relationship is like the dance scene, because it starts off with the camera zoomed in on Powder's shoes, which is a direct parallel to the first time we see Jinx and Ekko interact after the time skip. Then we hear the music start to get louder and louder, and look, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that a majority of y'all do not speak French, which might be a good thing in this context, because when you actually look for the translation of the lyrics, it is tragic. The lyrics translate to something along the lines of, you are the best thing to ever happen to me, but also the worst thing to ever happen to me. On that day when I met you, maybe I would rather that it never happened to me. The worst of all blessings, the best of all curses, I should stray away from you. But as the saying goes, stay close to your dearest friends, but also even closer to your adversaries. But my best enemy is you. Flee from me, the worst is you and I. Then we see Ekko and Powder start dancing, and if you notice, while the two are dancing, the scene is animated in 4 frames per second, which is very symbolic because right before this scene, Powder had just finished helping Ekko create his Z drive, a device that allowed Ekko to keep rewinding time over and over again up to 4 seconds. So when we look at this scene and it's in 4 frames per second and we see how happy Ekko and Powder are dancing with one another, it symbolizes how Ekko wants to stay in this moment, how he wants to keep rewinding time over and over and over again so that this moment never ends. And this theme of rewinding time and staying in the moment is only amplified more in this scene when Ekko asks Powder this.
You ever wish you could just stay in one moment?
Sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving a few things behind.
And this line is so important for Ekko as a character because I've seen so many people ask, why wouldn't Ekko stay in this timeline? Like, it's objectively better than his timeline in every way possible. As much as Ekko liked it, he knew that this wasn't his world, this wasn't his Zaun, and this wasn't his Powder. That's why when she leans in to kiss Ekko, Ekko says, can we just pretend like it's the first time? Because to him, this is his first time being romantic with her. But when Ekko's talking to her, he says that he wants to thank her. He says that somewhere down the line, he gave up on Zaun and gave up on Powder, talking about his Powder. Ekko had allowed his timeline to convince him that no matter how hard you try, some things just can't be fixed. But him being sent to this other timeline where he gets to experience firsthand a happy, healthy Zaun, a Powder that is that same good person that he remembers from his childhood, it gives him the motivation to try again, not just for Zaun, but also for Jinx, which is ultimately why Ekko ends up giving this world's Powder a goodbye gift and goes back to his timeline. Now, a certain narrative I've seen some people try to push is that while Ekko was romantic with the Powder in the alternate universe, that doesn't really mean that he had romantic feelings for Jinx, but that couldn't be farther from the truth because the whole purpose of the Powder in the alternate universe was to show Ekko that his Jinx, his Powder, is still worth fighting for, to show him what could be, and there were just too many parallels alluding to this, especially when we go back to the lyrics of the song pointing out that the two are the best of friends and worst of enemies, but also the fact that the entire time Ekko was talking to Powder, he was talking to her as if she was the Jinx from his universe, saying that he gave up on her, which is why when Ekko saves Jinx from committing, he tells her that no matter what happened in the past, it's never too late to build something new when there's someone worth building for. Now, if I'm being honest, proving that Jinx actually loved Ekko in this timeline is a little bit harder because the show doesn't actually show it, and that's partially due to the fact that the creator has come out saying that they cut a lot of scenes between these two in the final episode. But one scene we do get is when Ekko is talking Jinx out of committing and she keeps doing it and he keeps having to rewind. Ekko tells her, "I'm just gonna sit down and try to convince an old friend not to blow us up." Jinx then looks down at the grenade and realizes that if she uses it, Ekko will also get hurt, so then she flings herself forward, which, you know, I guess if you want to call that romantic, you can. But all jokes aside, there were some hints dropped in the episode that alluded to the idea that there was some special bonding time between Ekko and Jinx between the start of the episode and the ending. For one, when they both pull up to the final battle, they're both wearing very similar outfits. And if you look at Ekko, he noticeably has an X spray painted over his chest, similar to how Jinx would do it. And when you look at Jinx, she also has the same X spray painted over her chest, but she also has Ekko's hourglass drawn on her arm. And when Jinx pulls out her minigun, the design is a cross between her old one and Ekko's hoverboard. So it's very clear that something went down in between the start of the episode and when they actually get to the fight. But recently a new Jinx figure was released, and one of the people that helped work on this figure actually commented on how Jinx in the final battle was actually supposed to be wearing a coat that was very similar to Ekko's jacket. And something else that's really interesting is that after season 2 of Arcane wrapped up, League of Legends got an update where the characters that were in the show got a ton of new dialogue. And Jinx has some very interesting dialogue when it comes to Ekko.
I had a crush until you started talking to the gun.
What's the matter, little man? You really jealous of a gun? Which Ekko am I getting today? Genius or madness? Why do you always look at me like that, Ekko? Professor! Remember me? I'm Ekko's really good friend, Powder.
But I think the final bit of evidence that shows that there was and possibly will be more going on between these two in future League of Legends shows actually comes from an interview with one of the co-producers of Arcane, where in the interview he talks about how Ekko actually talked Jinx out of committing and alludes to the idea that their story isn't over yet.
You know, I think what's so cool about Ekko and Jinx is that when he tries to convince Jinx that there's like a different, that there is a version of power of her that is so different, you know, and that like is a whole more complete person, and he's seen it. It's not like some theory or him trying to convince her. I think she can feel that when he's like, that version of powder exists, right? You know, and so. I think that's really beautiful, and it really also was Ekko what Ekko needed, you know, to kind of see like I mean, Powder is such an amazing example of what Zaun can be, you know, and I think that's like worth kind of continuing, you know, their story for.
Which honestly, I need them to pull through on this one because they cannot get away with giving my boy Ekko the ending that he got. But yeah, man, Timebomb looks like it is canon and we will be seeing more of it in the future. I honestly wasn't expecting this to be one of the best aspects of Arcane Season 2, but boy was I surprised. Jinx and Ekko just have such an interesting story and an interesting dynamic that it's gonna feel so worth it when we finally see these two together again. But anyways, I love all y'all for checking out another video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload my next video. And until then, it's been your boy Corin, and I'm off this.